Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here, and my immediate apologies for talking to you in English. Hopefully in a couple of years I will start talking in Estonian, but as for Latvian, it is currently pretty challenging to learn Estonian, although I'm doing my best. So, with no time spending, let me start with putting a note why I'm talking rather about open data ecosystem as a bit more inclusive term, a bit more wider term compared to open data use. So this is due to the point that actually when we talk about open data, I'm pretty sure that all of you understand that it is not only about open data and making data publicly available on the open data portal. So we do not suggest that actually we will open the data and immediately they will be started to use and public value will be started to be created within it, because it is about slightly more complicated process, complex process, starting from the very beginning of the data acquisition, data processing, making data ready for being published on open government data portal, being compliant with open data principles, and then to finally have them on the portal, to have this portal operating and also keeping this data maintained, and finally to be used by the users, where we also see a sort of different actors within this. So basically data users, data publishers, data owners, if they are different, to name just a few. So it is rather about the wider concept of open data ecosystem, and this is what we are using typically in research to make sure that we do not oversimplify the problem, scoping it down to the data only, that we are rather considering it in a broader sense. And it is also the case what we are doing in Open Data Charter I am a part of. So we are trying to take this more holistic view on this point. Of course, I will not dive into very many detail of what public data ecosystem or open data ecosystem stands for, because we have conceptualized this, and actually you can see that it is quite a broad concept, and most probably you cannot see because it has too many items. And actually this is to say that we are trying to be also very concise. So we decided not to go to very many details and to keep it very short. But this is to say that these are all those factors, all those items we must consider, and all of them, even more, even worse, are interrelated. So to simplify this a bit, perhaps we could simplify it towards this very well-known golden triangle consisting of people, process, technologies, and on top of it we are putting data. So basically data is interacting with all those components, but of course not so very simple, because of course even within those people, technologies, and etc., we have some components which are of great importance, not to say about what is implying from the current paradigm that we also think and we use, because it is already an integral part of this paradigm, different types of intelligence, where we talk not only about artificial intelligence, but also about data, collective, and finally embodied intelligence. Whereas for artificial intelligence, of course, we now have also generative AI concept. And although they are considered to be those concepts which are expected to drive maturation of these open data ecosystems, making them more inclusive and more sustainable, but at the very same time, it is also to say that they pose some risk, or rather trigger out to us to reconsider those items which constitute those open data ecosystems. Even worse, if we talk about open data ecosystems, it is just a tiny thing into the ecosystem of so-called public data ecosystems. And this is to say that actually these open data ecosystems must today, as implies from the current reality, communicate with other types of data ecosystems, such as smart data ecosystems, and etc. So those data ecosystems which are also about data, but not mandatory about open data ecosystems. Perhaps publicly available data to some extent, but nevertheless not necessarily, such as smart city data ecosystems, public data spaces, fair data ecosystems, perhaps even data marketplaces, and etc., because all of them are expected to be communicating. And even worse, but rather this will be the very last point of these worsening things, is about the dynamic nature of those public data ecosystems. So basically this is to say that what we knew at the very beginning when we just started to dive into the world of open government data in 90s, 2000s, this depends, actually, of course, is not anymore the same in none of those components, neither in actors, nor in data types, not in processes, not in components and relationships. And even worse, so definitely the very last time I'm saying this, this construct. Today, we are expected not only to be compliant with the actual needs of the government and potential data users of today, but rather be forward-looking and trying to foresee what will be the needs tomorrow, the day after, the week after, and the year after. So this is to say that open data ecosystems are complex, diverse, and dynamic in nature, where for this dynamism, it is also about coevolution. So basically not only the entire system evolves, but also individual components, which in turn trigger the evolution of other components. So now we are finally to the point, what is the role of academia in this, in building these inclusive and sustainable open data ecosystems. When we talk about academia, so basically what I was invited to talk about, we can divide this into a couple of components: academic activities we are performing, namely courses we are delivering and developing, and also thesis we are supervising with our students, and research we are conducting ourselves. To start with a bit simpler concept of those theses we are supervising. Why simpler? Because it was more or less possible for me to find at least a couple of those theses which have been developed around open data in past 5 years. We can see that quite a few theses have dealt with this aspect, but at the very same time we can see that they are quite diverse. They start from the very beginning, such as the one on the right side for me, on the left side for you, dealing with the barriers and enablers of opening data. So basically from the very beginning of the data lifecycle, when those public authorities are making decision on whether to open data, what type of data to open, etc. This study has been conducted by Catherine, who's here today, and she's with the Association of Estonian Municipalities and cities. We were trying to identify those barriers at the local level, because actually this is what we have received from both from research and also from private sector to be a very painful topic today. Immediate comment, actually it is a painful topic for the entire world, because while we are more or less mature in the national, at the national level, we are not good enough at local level, and Estonia, unfortunately, is not an exception. Whereas these data are of particular importance for both for researchers and for private sector, especially if we talk about some public value to be generated for a particular entities of those local levels. It is also about the later stages of data lifecycle, such as taking care of those of you who are publishing those data sets, taking into account the point that actually we understand that you are doing this on the top of your regular duties. We are trying to simplify your life by means of introducing some mechanisms, or at least developing prototypes of these mechanisms to simplify data upload and data annotation, which tend to be a headache. And actually, for the very many cases, even within Estonian Open Data Portal, there is a lack of tags associated with the data sets, which results actually in the fact that while they're on the portal, they cannot be properly found. And as such, a solution which has received an award today, this morning, and thanks a lot for this, has been developed by a student of mine, Kevin Klimask, which leveraged LLMs to develop this mechanism. It is also about studying other data lifecycle stages, such as creation of something from the data, so basically the generating of those insights, starting with the mapping problems of the Estonian Open Data Portal, and then to creating data analytics dashboards, and finally also using the data itself with creating dashboards for instance, Estonian regional economic data visualization. What can we say? That actually, although I have analyzed those theses developed in the very last 5 years, most of them comes from 2024, so basically the last academic year, and one the year before. And we can see that before there were none of those theses, at least those which would really mention that they are about Open Government data or they are using Open Government data, which can be partly due to license which is assigned to Open Government data, so that we are not expected to mandatory to report the use of such. Although the European Commission now tends to invent some recommendations on how to use it, how to acknowledge the use of open data so that we can track it, and we can also measure the impact finally, but this is still in progress. Of course, the reason behind this is not very clear, but perhaps it is a coincidence, but nevertheless, it sounds like it could be the case that this is just due to maturation of the Open Government Data Initiative of Estonia. So at the very beginning, it was not so very competitive at the global scale, and now when it became to be known as a trendsetter, also students start to be interested. This also led to the fact that finally we are not known on the global area as a sort of laggard in open data, paradox of open government, stepchild in Estonia's data management strategy as we were a couple of years back, but we finally have this badge of made in Estonia, also on open government data, not only on e-government as it was before, where more and more studies, the vast majority of them comes from students, are talking about the excellence and how we progressed in this time. Hopefully, it will improve with the time even more because currently we are discussing with the European Commission of bringing the course on big data test infrastructure to University of Tartu, and I hope that it will be also possible to expand this invitation to all the Estonian universities so that more students could be involved in this. This is what concerns thesis, but we, of course, use this open government data also in development and delivery of the courses. And as you can see, actually, this proposal of the courses is quite wide, and this is just a voluntary responses of colleagues of mine because I have bothered them with questions of whereas you are using open government data as I need to report this at this event. So perhaps they are even more, but those who reported it, this course concerns data science, machine learning, statistical data science, and visualization, and surprisingly also data engineering. Why it is the case and why they are finally starting to use not Kaggle or some domain-specific data sets, but rather refer to open government data, because it is always more interestingly to develop something that has some practical and public value, at least for them to be derived. So it is not at some very high abstract level of doing things, but it is rather an immediate acquisition of those knowledges of the specific specialty or discipline such as data science or data engineering, while immediately deriving some insights on the local area you belong to. And as you can see, these data tend to be very different because it is all about project-based learning within those courses where students define what really matters for them, what is closer to their hearts. And typically these are data about crimes, bus traffics, economy of different counties, so some either social or environmental aspects. As mentioned, finally, not Kaggle, but rather open data or open government data portal is used, which is used even more frequently than in average within Europe, as reported by the European Open Data Portal recent research. And finally, although I'm almost running out of the time, but this was intentionally made very concise. So when we talk about research, of course, we do use open government data in our research as well. In the very many cases, rather as a secondary data, but not of greater importance because we don't have to spend the time to gather this data, and hopefully even this accuracy is greater and we are saving our time. And typically this research concerns urban analysis, environmental research, and crisis management, whereas for urban analysis, we are using this geographic and environmental data on population density, work, home locations, and greenery, and these are used as input data, as complementary data to the data we are gathering ourselves to develop and train our models. Whereas for environmental research, one example which immediately pops up in my mind comes from Taltech, whereas the first one was from University of Tartu, where open data have been used as a semi-primary source already, so basically relied very much on these data coming from Open Government Data Portal in developing automated environmental compliance monitoring of rivers. And with a reference to crisis management, of course, it is not only about COVID, it is also about electricity crisis and other forms of crisis we have, but COVID-19 probably was the one which was best overviewed in the internet. So the data have been very widely used for data visualization and forecast modelings, where even more different helices, different stakeholders came together, namely academia and public sector, private sector, and etc., to co-create those solutions. And actually, this has given the rise to what we have developed with another colleague of mine who was at that point with Estonia as well, to drive to push the research within co-creation, open government data co-creation for crisis combating. So this is to say that the open data has not only fueled some solutions, but also helped to move the science even slightly out of the scope of this. One interesting note that in that research we have performed a comparative analysis of Estonia, Latvia, the country I belonged to at that point, and Czech Republic. And interestingly, although University of Tartu in particular is known to be very good in building relationships with the private sector, but Estonia was the laggard, to say, in this sense, in this particular scenario. So private sector actually have not contributed to this very much. And why typically we talk about open data and data in general for AI, so this is a mantra we are repeating, I would rather say that data for AI and AI for data, and data not only for AI, but also for other disciplines, such as data engineering, to name just one, which have been mentioned before, and not only AI, but also other emerging technologies for data. So when we are asked about what is our role of academia and also of public sector in open data ecosystem, I would say that it is multifold, starting with the data consumer, where both we are acting as data consumer to create public value, be it environmental, societal, and economic. The former two are more applicable to academia because the vast majority of solutions are environmental and societal. Data consumer to educate, so to deliver those courses and those specific disciplines we are delivering by means of using open data to make it more attractive for people, for students, because after those courses, they really have an interest in open government data, and they are coming to us asking for some thesis topics around open government data because they finally know about the existence and about the actual value of thereof, and contributed to sustainability of open data ecosystems and mythbusters on the global arena because Digital Government Society, I also belong to, asks us, the research community of Estonia, to bring more evidence of how we transformed and how we transformed from the laggards to rather trendsetters, as we are currently being named by Maturity Report. Of course, there are some things to combat which prevents us from using this data. Some of those are, as reported by colleagues and also by students, is lack of interest or perhaps of awareness. This might be the consequence of the point that at the very beginning, when open government data was a very popular trend worldwide, we, Estonia, were not as good as it could be, and so this created some negative impression, and currently these are just consequences of this. Perhaps it is also the lack of high-value data sets, because currently we are also trying to understand what might be mechanisms to identify high-value data sets at local level, because those coming from European Union are rather very generalistic, and they do not tackle those issues which are close to our hearts in Estonia. It is also about, if we talk about those people who actually use this data, about annotation, quality, consistency, granularity, where the more detailed and raw data are required, and data structure. So these are also areas where we see ourselves, academia, also as a sort of contributors to tackle those issues, because as have been demonstrated also by the work which has been awarded today, we tend to contribute to some of those points, such as data annotation, for instance. I will skip these recommendations, which have been brought on a very similar topic I have been invited to talk about today by European Open Data Portal, because those recommendations they have drawn actually are predominantly fulfilled, at least to some extent, by Estonia, and those which are not, actually, I would not say that we are super ready for this, because it mentions IOSCE, and as an internal person, I know that actually we are not ready yet for this. So I would say that what can be done to tackle those issues is to take this ecosystem perspective, so do not focus only on what else data I can open, but rather to treat this from the system theory perspective and to look on other components as well, and to leverage from those different paradigms of intelligence which promises great benefits if implemented effectively. The other question, what stands for to be implemented effectively, and this is yet to be studied, and hopefully academia will contribute to this. Thank you very much. Aitäh.
Thank you, Anastasija. And we have, of course, as you can see, a lot of questions for you. But let's take the most popular one. Is that Estonian high-ranking position earned just by being a good student and fulfilling required existing open data criteria, or have we provided some unique concepts or innovative tools to Europe?
Very good question indeed, because actually I would say that yes could be the response to both of those parts of the question, because of course when it comes to benchmarkings, and we have also together with colleagues of mine from other countries, because we all have this question as regards to our open government data initiatives, we have studied those benchmarks, and indeed they are very, very corrupted, and in very many cases indeed we are playing with the system just to fulfill those requirements and just to be better, not to be laggards to say, but at the very same time at one point we have conducted together with, again, colleagues of mine, the usability analysis of over 100 open data portals, so we are crazy a bit. And yeah, with this to say that I can confirm that in some cases, in some selected aspects, indeed, Estonian Open Government Data Portal is competitive enough. Of course, it is rather at a very high level, because it is rather about having or not having some feature that other portals do or do not have. When we delve into the deep of those of implementation of those features, it might not be so very good implementation, as has been also demonstrated by the student of the colleague of mine, by Jaak law student, at some point when he studied exactly those features. But at the very same time, I wouldn't say that it is just about the fulfillment of those criteria, and otherwise we are not good enough. There is something we can be definitely proud of.
Okay. Can you name any cool data initiatives from Latvia?
Oh, cool initiatives from Latvia. So first of all, to say that I am almost 3 years with Estonia. It is just an immediate response if I will not be able by this time to process this information and find something to reply to say better. I would say, so this depends on what was the vision of the question, and if I am allowed to expand this a bit, I would say that these are constant hackathons we are having for different groups of citizens. For instance, annually I am a part of, I am one of mentor of open data portals for pupils. So for those people coming from school, and we are trying to really showcase what is the benefit of open government data and now intersection of open government data and artificial intelligence, so that we can see that something can be done with this data. And while at the very beginning it seemed that they have been forced to come by those teachers of theirs or something like that, during the time we are working with them, because it is non-traditional, not very conventional type of hackathon. It is not within 1 or 2 days. It is rather expanded for the month or so. We can see that at the very end of the day, there is a very great interest and very great solutions, and some of them have been already adopted by regional Ministry of Regional Development of Latvia. Now it is called slightly different, but it is only a few months when it has been renamed, and I still stick to the old name. It is also about the hackathons for private sector. We have some of them have been made just recently, and it also had some guests from Estonia, as far as I know. So I would say that this promotion in terms of hackathons, so not only we open the data, but also let's gather together and produce something, because also it was, to the best of my understanding, something that brought a lot of value here in Estonia when the COVID have been here, have been just started, and when hackathons took place and those cool solutions have been developed that were actually announced in all the world, that we also need something like that. So Corona card and etc. So I would say it is about hackathons where we try to really push it into the action.
Thank you very much, Anastasija, Nikiforova. Here you go. Thank you very much.